All right, just one moment. All right. Well, welcome to our fifth annual National Prehealth Conference Medical Student Panel. My name is Alexian. I am the co-founder and co-host of the National Prehealth Community. I started this back in 2020, and I'm so excited to host this panel of students from the University of Virginia School of Medicine, Go Who's, as I myself am an incoming medical student M1, and will also be curious about what their lives look like in medical school. I would love for everyone to go ahead and use that reactions button at the bottom, and please give a round of applause to Miski, Jay, Isabella, and Haley for joining us. If you see those numbers next to their name, that indicates their class. So we have an SMD 24, 26, 27. I myself am an SMD 28, I guess, and then SMD 25. So to get started, before we start answering all of your questions, I'd love for all of the medical students to introduce themselves. And Michael, go ahead and stop screen sharing so we can see everyone. Perfect. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and let's go ahead with Miski first since you're graduating. I know, congratulations, by the way, Miski just graduated and matched at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. in pediatrics. Yay. Great job. Yeah,
Thanks,
so I'd love,
Lexi.
could you share your name, academic and non-academic interests or clubs that you're involved in, your year, and a fun fact?
Well, I just want to give a big shout out to Lexi. So thank you so much for inviting us to be able to kind of share our insights. And hi, friends. It's so nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Miski. It rhymes with whiskey, if that can help. I am graduating M4, graduate tomorrow. I matched into pediatrics. So if you have any questions about peds, the little people, please don't hesitate to reach out. At UVA, I'm really excited to be involved in our student government as well as SNMA, which stands for Student National Medical Association. If you guys know about MAPS at the undergrad level, that's kind of what the MAP surgeon is at the med school level. So really just a group that helps advocate and support underrepresented students in medicine and just provide a community of support to navigate all the ups and downs of medicine. And a fun fact, my initials are MMS. And my favorite candy is M&M. So it like ended up working out, I guess, in a weird way, because I don't know if my mom was eating those when she was pregnant with me, and then all of a sudden that's how it happened. But it's so nice to meet you all. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. And Haley, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. Hi, my name is Haley. I'm a first year at UVA. I am very early, so I don't know exactly what I'll be going into, but right now I'm interested in musculoskeletal things, so orthopedics, physical medicine and rehabilitation, radiology. So we'll see. And outside of that, I'm involved as well in the SNMA. I'm also involved with the Christian Medical Association here. And outside of that, I like to get involved with things in the community. I help a lot at my church with the kids and things like that. And a fun fact is I did gymnastics growing up, and that's how I actually got interested in medicine in the first place. I had a lot of injuries. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Awesome. Thank you. Jay, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jay. I am a third-year medical student at UVA. My interests right now are, all different things, but our radiology seems kind of cool right now. On a student level, I think I'm involved in the South Asian Medical Student Association at UVA and the radiology interest group. And I enjoy playing tennis in my free time and reading some science fiction books. So yeah, if you guys have any recommendations, feel free to send them my way.
Awesome. And Isabella.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isabella. I usually go by Bella. Hi, Miski. I am a rising fourth year. So as Misty's class graduates this weekend, we, SMD 25, will go from, I guess, junior or varsity to senior M4s. Currently interested in pathology. I think that's probably my final decision. And outside of medicine, I'm interested in like scuba diving and things like that. And ties into my fun fact, I went to college for marine biology. and did a big, I guess, 180 and decided to go into human people medicine. So very excited to meet you all. If you have any questions about medical school or pathology or anything like that, let me know. Clubs, I'm part of the Latin Medical Student Association. I'm Cuban ethnically, and then also QMD, which is the LGBTQ club here at UVA School of Medicine that represents the wide breadth of queer medicine, including gender and sexual orientation, all sorts of things. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out and we can talk about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your introductions. We already have like 4 or 5 questions lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and pick one. I think we have 2 that are talking about gap years. I think I'd love to ask, what did you do during your gap years, if you took one at all? And would you recommend a gap year for pre-med? And whoever would like to go first.
I can kick this one off maybe. I did take a gap year. So I graduated college in 2020, took off 2020 to 2021, and then 2021 is when I started medical school. So I spent that time teaching down in South Florida where I was living at the time. And I think I did some tutoring as well. Everything was COVID, so Zoom. So it was pretty easy, I will say, in the circumstances to, find remote jobs and things like that while I was transitioning. In terms of whether you should take a gap year, I think it really depends on your situation and things like that. A lot of schools, it used to be that the traditional route was preferred, that you did your 4 years of medical school, you go straight into, or excuse me, undergrad, and you go straight into medical school. However, nowadays, I think a lot of schools are really open to the gap years and seeing like how you use your time to either boost your application or maybe have more experiences that are meaningful to you, whether that be through volunteering or working or research, however you decide to spend it. So I say this because I was not planning to take a gap year, but life circumstances occurred and I was devastated. I was like, oh my God, my life is over, blah, 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 blah. I'm never going into medical school. That's not true at all. Like a gap year is not going to stop you from pursuing a medical career at all. If anything, it may actually help you if you have some parts of your application that you feel are could be tended to a little bit more.
I echo everything that Bella had said. I agree. I think it's a very personal decision. I did take a gap year. I took one gap year, graduated in 2019 and started medical school in 2020. And I worked as a medical assistant at an urgent care center that had started the job when I was in college. So it was nice to be able to continue that. And then I was also working in research projects. I don't think there's like a right answer to this. Like Bella said, it's like what you feel like is best for you. I will share, like, I think my class was like 50-50. Half of the people came straight through undergrad and then half of the people kind of took either one or more gap years. And I think there's pros and cons to both option. I think a pro I thought was like I got to save and make money, which when in medical school you don't have a job. So it's like sometimes a little bit hard with like paying for things, even though you get loans and stuff. So I think it was really nice to be able to save that money. But I think I also just needed a little bit of a break, like from school, or just to like reset, rejuvenate, like get excited again after being at pre-med. I don't know, maybe you guys can relate to it. It's just you get burnt out really easily. And I was like, I just want this time off just to like reset before I start medical school. And then looking back, I think it was like one of the best decisions that I made because coming into med school, I was like fresh, ready to go, like, and just ready to like start studying again and kind of being in school. So I think it was a great decision that I made, but obviously very personal. And don't feel like if you have to take a gap year any less than your classmates. Because like I said, like I feel like my friends have come from all different walks of life and there's people and things that I've learned from each option. So really whatever works best for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing those responses. I myself am currently in my 2nd gap year, and I'm so glad for me that I did that. I think it really prepared me for medical school. So whether you take one or not, it's, again, I think a very personal choice. I love this question here. What made you decide to pursue your medical education at UVA? What's one thing you love about UVA School of Medicine?
I can start with this one. I actually went to UVA for undergrad as well. So I was familiar with Charlottesville and the university already. But I my favorite thing about UVA right now is the people. And I hear this from so many people, so many of my classmates. We have amazing faculty that do amazing things, but I also just love my peers so much. I think that something that was hard in pre-med is that, everyone is applying to medical school and it really just feel so competitive, and it doesn't feel like that at all here. It is a really collaborative. We work together all the time. We share notes, we study together. And I'm so impressed by my peers for all the things that they've done before medical school, but also they are just so kind and caring and genuine. And I want every single one of them to be doctors one day. So I love them.
Yeah, I want to echo what Haley said. Like, I guess part of the reason that I chose UVA is like the interview day. I feel like out of like all the interviews that I had, I think I vibed with the people that I think I vibed with my interviewers from UVA the most, especially like my student interviewer. And I think that really contributed to my decision, really. Like you can obviously like use ranking and like whatever you want, like whatever metrics you want, but at the end of the day, like when you're when you're like in the midst of like studying, you really want to be thinking about, what kind of people do I want around me during like really that, and medical school is very difficult. So you want like a good group of people to be around, and that's really what it's going to come down to at the end of the day. So
Awesome. Yeah, I honestly definitely agree with you both. That's why I chose UVA. I was making a bunch of different decisions and I committed last month. And yeah, it was because of the people and my interview day. So those are my answers too. Amazing. So, what experience would you highly recommend for pre-med students to get involved in before applying?
That's such a great question. I don't know that I have the answer because, again, I think it's a very personal thing, but I think having some sort of exposure into medicine can be really helpful just so that you know what you're getting yourself into. I think it's really hard to imitate what like medical school life will be or an attending life or a resident life will be as like a pre-med, but just getting that snapshot of like, do you like office work or do you like shadowing in the hospital? Do you like, the insurance aspect of medicine? Do you like the education aspect of medicine? Do you like pediatrics or don't like just kind of getting and seeing all the things I think can be really helpful so that once you are like Bella applying into residency programs or Haley and Jay trying to figure out what you want to do, you can always like look back on those experiences and see like what you resonated with and what you didn't. But I also want to add like during the application cycle, I think it's easy to like feel like you have to fill out these buckets of like, oh, I have to do research, clinical. I think what admissions programs are really looking for is finding the best you, right? So if you don't do like 100 hours of research, but you're really passionate about sports, then like do your sports, do what makes you happy, because when you're doing stuff that makes you happy, you're able to talk about it. You can be enthusiastic about it. They get to see a different dimension about you. But also I feel like across the board as doctors were like helping treat other human beings. So the more you get to interact in whichever facet of life that is, there's things that you can take away about like discipline, teamwork, compassion, understanding, just a different view of the world. And I think all of that can be really helpful when you're applying into med school. So I think it's nice to know like what medicine is from a clinical sense, but really whatever like fills your cups and makes you happy. I think keep doing that because that's going to shine through on your application.
I just want to echo Misty, especially on this last bit. I find that it can be like, I understand your guys' position because we were all in it. It can be very difficult to feel like you stand out during your application cycle because all of you are probably like top 10, 5% of your school. You're all straight A students, 4.0, like a million hours of research, volunteering, whatever. You've done all the necessary things you need to get into medical school. I think what medical schools really like to see nowadays too is what makes you unique in your personal life. What are you passionate about? Like I said, if it's sports, like make that a big part of your app. If, like Haley said, she was a gymnast for most of her life, I'm sure that played a huge role in her application and was like a very unique thing about her. Like, oh, you were a gymnast and you seem to have gotten hurt a lot. So how is that experience? Like, if you're like an avid biker or you're a painter, you're a reader, or you love movies, whatever it is that you're passionate about and that you find unique about yourself, really lay into it because that's what they want to see. They want to see who you are as a person and what makes you like enjoy life and enjoy being around others or, just enjoy being yourself. So, don't be afraid to put that on your application. And any passion projects you have, they don't have to be clinical or medical. Yes, you should have some experience in that, as Missy alluded to. But if you're someone who's like, hey, my passion project is that I love to paint by the trees or something, and I started like a little club about that, you can put that. That's absolutely wonderful to have on your application. So don't feel that you have to be boxed into that clinical scientific mindset for applications.
Awesome. Thank you both. I'd love to ask, how did you figure out your specialty? This may be more of a question for you, Miski, but anyone else who feels like they know the direction they're going to go into. But yeah, how did you feel like that specialty was the right choice for you?
That's a great question. I think my story may be a little bit different than other people's stories, but growing up, I had a lot of health setbacks. And so I was always in and out of the doctor's office and out of hospitals. I felt like so much of my identity morphed into being a patient. But in those moments, I just saw the doctors as people that help others feel better. And I thought they did a really cool job, but I never really thought oh, this is what I want to do when I grew up. It was when I was applying to colleges and trying to figure out what my major was that I thought back on experiences that I felt made me the person that I am and kind of shaped the way I view things. And I always kept coming back to my experiences as a patient. And I always felt if I could take some of those emotions that I had of feeling helpless or frustrated or feeling I was different from my friends because I was in the hospital, and I could morph that into an avenue that I can better connect with others, that was something I really wanted to do. And I found that avenue was other kids that were sick growing up or still are sick, because I really wanted them to see or help them figure out that whatever your illness is, your disease is, that doesn't make you. There's so many aspects and facets to your life, and that illness is one aspect of your identity, but you don't want it to take over or even hinder what you see yourself doing in the future. And so I think that was where my passion for peds had started. And then in undergrad, I was shadowing in a pediatrician's office. I got to see how he interacted with his patients. That reiterated my interest. I came into medicine in medical school kind of interested in pediatrics, but it was really when I was on my clerkships and I got to be in the peds world for 6 weeks in a row that I was okay, this is what I want to do. And it was nice because peds was my first clerkship year, so I got to compare everything else to peds, and nothing really hit the mark. So that's when I knew I wanted to do pediatrics. But I will say, I think I knew that I wanted to do peds for a while, but I would say so many of my friends, coming into med school, you don't have to have it figured out. That's the whole reason we have clerkships. That's the whole reason our 4th year is 18 months long. And so you get to explore, see what's out there, see what you're passionate about, look at different areas in medicine. There's so many facets of medicine, educators, advocacy, there's so much. So please don't feel you have to know it. Otherwise you're a terrible med student or you're not getting into med school. That's not the case. I just happen to know because I it was a little tough growing up, but that's not to say that we don't have amazing pediatricians out there that maybe don't have a direct patient experience, but maybe they're on their clerkship and it clicks for them. Or pathology, I'm gonna love Dr. Martin. She's already somebody I adore so much, but now that she's gonna be a pathologist, I can always call her with my histology questions. So it works out great.
Yeah, I can kind of speak on my pathology journey for Miski. So Miski, I will tell you, is the pediatrician you want your kids to go to. Absolutely. She is one of the sweetest, most patient, kindest persons. You can't be mean as a pediatrician. I'm sorry. It just is not possible. But I struggled a little bit with finding what I wanted to do because pathology, for those of you who don't really know a lot about it, is not really a patient-facing specialty. You're in the labs, you're behind the microscope, you're doing a lot of histology and looking at slides and autopsy and more organ type grossing and things like that. So I really, really enjoy it, or I wouldn't be going into it, but I also had this preconceived notion that, oh, it's mostly for introverts who maybe don't want to have patient contact. I'm not going to see people. I'm going to be miserable in my life, something to that extent. And that's not true at all. I find that pathology is very much a communicative specialty because what we're doing, and this is part of why I enjoy it so much, is someone gets a biopsy, someone gets a surgery, the surgeon, whoever here on this panel is going into surgery or who's out there, when you take a specimen out and you're looking for cancer, you'll send it to your pathologist. Your pathologist can look at that specimen and right then and there tell you, yeah, this is cancer, or yeah, this is not cancer. And they can tell you, if there is cancer, how far or close are you from removing all of it out? And I think the fact that you can look at one piece of glass and determine a person's entire course of like clinical course, whether they get treatment, whether they get chemo, radiation, things like that, is just absolutely mind blowing. It really is. And so that really drew that to me. And then what you have to do is, hey, the pathologists have their own language, like, oh, this may be like an infiltrative endometrioid carcinoma, something like that. And a lot of patient-facing providers, we get at UVA a very good histology and pathology course, but not a lot of schools do that. So they may be like, I have no idea what this means. And so the pathologist has to communicate these findings in a way that both the physician and the patient can understand. So it's very much a communicating specialty. You have to call other providers. You have to constantly at blood bank or anything, take consults. So I found myself really enjoying that aspect as well. And it's a little macabre, but the autopsies as well are very interesting. And I think that should have been like a hint to me in the future, like, hey, if you're someone who enjoys doing stuff like that, pathology might be something for you as well. So, but I did struggle with it because I'm pretty much a chatty Cathy, and I didn't know if I wanted to not see patients anymore. And I thought to myself, well, you're still providing care for them. You may not just be talking to them one-on-one, and that's okay too.
Thank you both so much for sharing. I can definitely see the passion that you both have for your specialty direction. So it's really inspiring. And it's like Bella, that's really cool, your perspective on pathology and how like you can still provide such impactful care just through that specimen. So yeah, awesome. Next question. What has been something surprising about medical school that you didn't know coming in beforehand?
That's such a great question. I know I've been speaking a lot, so I really wanted Bella, Jay, or Haley to jump in, but maybe while they're thinking of their answer, I think I always thought about medical school as like it's a rigorous time. I always thought like it's hard, but I didn't really truly understand what hard meant until I was in medical school. And it wasn't because it was academically challenging. I think coming into med school, we all want to be doctors, right? So we're getting to learn about the human body, all this like cool stuff. So even though you're studying, it's like very intriguing stuff that you're like in undergrad, you're like, well, I took this course. I don't know when I'll ever use it. But in med school, it's like everything you learn will be really helpful. But I didn't realize how much stuff repeated. So like I was like that person where I was like, if I don't get it now, I'll never get it. I won't be a good doctor. Like I'm going to fail school. Like I'm going to be so terrible. But one of my mentors always said, like, if it's important, it's going to come back around. So like that was something that really surprised me because like it helped me in my learning process and like letting go. Sometimes I think I always wanted to like dot all my I's, cross all my T's, like learn every detail of every little thing. And it's like with the volume of information that we're learning in medical school, it's really hard to know every little thing. Like you have to try to figure out a way to learn as much of the material as possible. And so it's all about kind of how many, I would say it's about depth in that like the variety of material, but not knowing so much about one thing. Because if it's really important, I'll come back around. So I think that was something that definitely surprised me, which is how learning happens in medical school. Because I didn't really know what I was walking into when I started. But it was nice to know that there's always that patient interaction or that patient case or like hearing like a topic different ways from different lecturers or attendings. At one point it's going to stick. So when it does stick, it's going to happen. And I know it's going to happen because like there's a method to this madness, so it always happens and it sticks for everybody. It's just whenever that happens, it's different. But don't be like too hard on yourself if you don't get it the first time or the second time. There's so many topics I can explain to you that like I got it on the fifth and the sixth time. Like it wasn't even the first, second, or third. I'm like, there is truly something wrong with me because why am I not getting it? Where like in undergrad, I would like get stuff like on the second or third try, but it took me like 5 or 6 times. But I think that's definitely something that surprised me. It was just giving yourself some grace that there's a lot of material, but like if it was easy, then like it wouldn't be hard to get into med school. It wouldn't be hard to be a doctor. So all this takes time, but you guys are amazing and I'm sure you'll be able to do it.
Misty, you're encouraging me right now. We're about to finish up our first year. So I think one of the biggest things that has surprised me is how much we've learned in just a year. And that's why I find that so encouraging. You know, the things that are important are going to keep coming back. And I think that even though I've learned so much more than I ever thought I would, I think that has been really encouraging. I think every hard season, every hard task that we've had, I've been so surprised at how much more I can learn or how much more I'm capable of. And I think that is what I'll continue to learn throughout med school and through my career.
Anybody else like to share something surprising? I can also move on.
I'll share one
Yeah.
thing. One of the things I was surprised about, since I actually am an out-of-state student, is the relationships I've formed. And Haley mentioned this earlier with my fellow med students. Miski and I are part of what's called Penn College. So we actually do our rotations in Fairfax, Virginia, not Charlottesville, but I'm in Charlottesville right now, so you can totally come back. But I will say, and I can only speak for my class, and Miski, I know a little about you guys too in your class SMD 24, but we have truly become a family up in Penn College. I mean, every single person in my class is someone that I know and I know well, and we're all friendly with each other. And I really did not anticipate just how close we would get with each other. And I think it's a beautiful thing, because when times get tough, and they do sometimes, you really have a lot of people to rely on, and people who are going through very similar situations that, you can talk to, vent to, and also give your shoulder to as well if they need something. So that was a very pleasant surprise, I'll say, for medical school.
That's something I'm very excited for. I'm gonna have a lot of roommates. I just signed the lease and I'm excited. I really hope we also have that similar nature in our class. All right, let me see. I'm looking for a most upvoted question. I see one here with 4 likes. What did you do to boost your application? That's an interesting question. Feel free to answer however you'd like. I never really thought of it as like boosting, but maybe something that made you stand out.
So I don't know if this was a boost, but I got my degree in marine science, and my undergraduate research was on sea turtles. And you'd be surprised by how many doctors are very intrigued by this. They're like, wow, what are turtles like? Like, what did you do? Were you on the boats and stuff? I'm like, yeah, I was on a boat a lot. And so things that are unique to your application, like if you've done something pretty cool, like whether it's marine science or that you've done, I think we mentioned this earlier, and I think it applies here, something that's unique to you, that can kind of boost your application. If you're talking about stats or anything like that, I think, the application process is so holistic that no one aspect is going to completely rule your entire application. Like the first thing they're going to see is, yeah, your scores and things like that, but they're going to look at your whole application, like your MCAT score, your GPA, your extracurriculars, your research, everything. And they're going to take it as one big file and just kind of take it all at as a bird eyes view instead of just kind of narrowing in on an MCAT. But yeah, unique things about you. If you have an interesting story to tell, that's also really cool. Like your personal statement is another thing that they'll take a look at. Yeah, I don't know if I answered this question very well. If anyone else has comments they want to make, let me know. You could probably take it better from here.
I think you did a beautiful job, Bella. Just really want you to know that. I think I echo everything Bella said. I think one thing I realized during the application cycle was things that I thought I was hesitant to share, or things that made me anxious to share. Like English isn't my first language, first generation Somali American. There's all these things where it's if I put it in, how people see it. But at the end of the day, I realized that part of my identity that sometimes I was hesitant to share shaped so much of why I was passionate about the work I was passionate about, the activities I was passionate about. I think helped me develop and realize the type of educator, physician, mentor, advocate that I wanted to be in the future. So that was something that I feel it took a lot of talking to advisors, and there's ways to say some of the stuff, even if it's challenges you face. I think all my amazing friends on this panel can attest medical school is challenging, and you're going to face a challenge at one point or another, and it's really about the resiliency. So figuring out what are those challenges, what are you passionate about, how do you get to that next stage when you're passionate about something but keep having one setback after another, I think is really valuable. So I think it's all about how you craft that message, but I would recommend don't be scared to share things that you're this makes me look less than or not as amazing as the next person. So I think exactly those things that set you apart as the group.
One example from my application was when I was an undergrad, I did some research in radiology and artificial intelligence, and that was something I was really interested in and passionate about. I did this research for all throughout my undergrad, so I did it for 4 straight years. And by the time I applied, I didn't have a single publication in the research that I was doing at all. All I had was, oh, I submitted to this journal, right? At that point, when I submitted my application, I was like kind of worried because I was like worried about how like admissions committees would see that, oh, you did all this work and like you don't have anything to show for it. But then at the end of the cycle, I feel like throughout the interview though, like I could tell that I could like anyone could ask me like any question they wanted to me about that work that I did, and I was able to like talk about it like in a really passionate and meaningful way. And I feel like that comes across as just as important as like the number of publications you have. You know, be doing something that you're interested in and that you can show that you're interested in it and that you show that you're passionate in it. It's just as important as like numbers or yeah. So
Awesome. Yeah, I think the application is so holistic, like Bella said, that there's really not one thing that would boost your application. Something I want to note though is I think clinical experience is extremely important for your medical school application. Seeing what it's like to work in the healthcare field, maybe being a medical scribe or an MA or an EMT, stuff like that. That's something I thought about, and that really helped me. But yeah, great question, you guys. Awesome. The next one, which year of medical school was the most challenging? I know at UVA it's a little different. There's like three phases. I was so confused at second look because I was like, there's no M2. Why isn't there a second year? So maybe you guys can talk about that. But also, which phase was the most challenging to you and how did you counteract those obstacles?
so I haven't been through all 4 years yet. I can wholeheartedly say that the beginning of clinical rotations, like the first like couple of months, are probably the hardest. So I started off with like surgery and OB-GYN rotations, and those are like a little bit known for being like the harder rotations to start off with. I feel like, we go through like 4 years of undergrads, we get really good at like taking multiple choice tests and like studying for exams and memorizing information. And then once you get to rotations, it's a whole different ball game. It's no longer like how much information do you know and like how well you can answer like a multiple choice question. Now it's like how well do you interact with people? How well do you communicate with attendings and residents? How well do you work with other people? And how confident you are in like presenting the information you know. So it's like it goes beyond just like how much knowledge you have, and that can be a little bit challenging to handle. Um, I would say that I was really hard on myself in like the first 2 weeks, but I would say like try to be forgiving to yourself because starting rotations is it's like a completely different experience than anything that you've ever done. So like be easy on yourself, surround yourself with like good people to like talk to and vent to about stuff that happens on rotations, and like just try to be a little bit better every day. And I feel like that's just my mentality for surviving rotations.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Jay. Third year was the worst. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that it's tough. It is. It's a different environment. Preclinical, which is 18 months at UVA, is very similar to undergrad high school in that you don't have to come to class, but if you come to class, there is virtual option. You have lecture time and then you self-study essentially. So it's very much self-regulated. You kind of determine your own schedule in that way. So it is tough because you're tested pretty frequently and there's a lot of information that's coming at you at supersonic speed that you need to kind of absorb and, be able to apply later on for your exams. But when you start clinicals, it's like he said, a different environment. You're in the hospital. And in that beginning time, I started with internal medicine. OB/GYN surgery is very difficult as one of the ones to start with. Internal medicine is the other one that's really difficult to start with because the breadth of knowledge that you see and need to know and apply is so broad. And I struggled. Oh my gosh, did I struggle? It's, waking up at 4:30 in the morning because I have to be at the hospital at 6 o'clock and having to, pre-chart and see patients at, and pre-round and come up with a presentation on what is going on with this person when I don't even know what's going on with this person. I'm just a baby med student. I don't know. It's a big change and you have different responsibilities. And on top of your clinical work, you still have to go home and study for a shelf exam, which is at the end of every clerkship, and you need to pass those. So people have said it before, but it's like you're a full-time student as well as a full-time employee, because you are working hours that an employee would work, but you also need to make sure that you build in time in your schedule to study, however that studying looks for you. And it's a lot. And, every rotation is different, and some are less enjoyable for some people than others. And that can be tough too, when you're in a rotation that you may not have a lot of interest in, but you still need to put in the work and be enthusiastic. So, but luckily it gets better. But there is joy to be found in third year, and there is a lot of learning that happens, a lot of learning. Like the beginning of third year versus the end of third year, I was a completely different student and a completely different student doctor, I will say. So it's not all doom and gloom, I promise. I'm making it sound terrible, but it's actually quite fun, but it is hard, I will say that.
All right, I'll ask the next question. How do you cope with feeling behind? Looking back when you were an undergrad and you were in pre-med, how do you cope with feeling behind? It seems like everyone has all these opportunities for the summer and all these certifications. I know I kind of felt this way. I was like, someone's doing this activity, someone's doing this. One person went to this conference, one person did this. And there's just so many different opportunities. How do you cope with potentially feeling behind if you ever did?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Haley.
Sure, I can start. This has been one of the hardest things about starting med school, is comparison is everywhere. And it's for good reason. There are amazing people and they're doing amazing things. I think that I've heard this as a pre-med, and I keep hearing it now, that everybody has their own path, and you can't compare yourself to other people, because things that bring them joy, things that are going to help them, might not bring you joy and might not help you at all. So I think that's been one of the biggest things, is trying to just focus on my path. And then practically, I think it's been looking to upperclassmen, looking to people, faculty and things like that, because they can let you know if there are some things that you're falling behind in, or there are ways that you could be making up. Because I think that when I look to my peers, or no matter how kind they are, we all are figuring this out together. And so I think that, yeah, staying on your path, and also just looking to other people, looking to people that have done this before for advice, and for encouragement and affirmation too, sometimes, is the best advice that I got.
Anybody else like to answer that question, or I can move on? All right. So I think this one's pretty interesting. What did you guys do for clinical experience? And did you need to get certified in anything? And do you recommend that?
So I personally did some EMT work, so that required like a certification. I also volunteer scribed with a physician during undergrad. I feel like in terms of clinical work, it just try to do what you can, and just be open and aware of opportunities that are happening around you. Talk to people, and yeah, yeah. I feel like there's no there's no mandatory. I just want to say there's no mandatory saying that, oh, you have to be an EMT in order to get into med school, or you have to be a scribe in order to get into med school. That's definitely not the case. But obviously, you need some kind of clinical experience, and find things that you're interested in and that you can actually you feel invested in, and that you can, that you're obviously passionate about. That yeah, and as long as you're doing that, you should be set.
Bella, you got it.
Niski and I will tag team this one. So I think shadowing was one thing. I asked my dad's cardiologist if I could shadow him, and he said sure. I think volunteering at the local hospital that was near me was another thing I did. And then I think just like little things here and there. But I want to say that if you are someone who is a pre-med student and you don't have any connections to medicine, and that is, I think a lot of people don't talk about this a lot. Many people have physician parents or nursing parents or someone in the family that is in medicine. It's easier for them to find some sort of resource for them to shadow or get some experience. And other people have nothing. And there may be a first gen med student, going into medicine kind of thing going on. If there is a pre-med club or a medicine club or anything like that, I highly suggest you talk to them, because from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, they usually have opportunities that they'll put out there for students to get some type of clinical experience. Like they may say, hey, we have this doctor who's looking for students to do research here, or hey, we have this doctor who is open to taking students in their clinic to shadow, so that I think is a very good resource to look to and also to ask them, because they're probably also applying to medical schools, is what I would assume, hey, what are some opportunities that you think I could do to get more clinical experience? And they would know what's best in your local area as to what to pursue.
Sweet. Yeah, I was a medical scribe for several years. Highly recommend that position. I think it was the most successful one for me in my area in Phoenix. So I did it through Scribe America, an emergency department. And I also worked outpatient and found a medical scribe job on Indeed and like Handshake and literally just looking at job applications. And honestly, personally, if I could go back, I highly recommend doing it through outpatient, or not, maybe not outpatient is what I'm trying to say, like going through the clinic itself and not through like Scribe America, because they do, at least in my experience in Phoenix, they offer like higher wages, more personal training, and more personal like one-on-one connection with the physician and mentorship. So that was my experience. I loved being a scribe. I'd love to ask the next question. Yeah, Haley, I definitely get that. It was exhausting. For sure. Let's see. Oh, this one has three. To demonstrate competitiveness, is there something aside from research that one can embark upon prior or during medical school, especially if one is not particularly fond in doing research?
Yeah, I love this question because I think it speaks to how like multifaceted, multidimensional like we all are. Like I think if you asked anybody in my class of 156 people, I don't think that you would find two people that are exactly the same, or their journey to medical school was exactly the same. I think for me, like research, I was more into like public health research than bench research, but even then I was like, there's other things that bring me enjoyment. And I think one of those things for me was community service, and like volunteering at the local food pantry in my like was the highlight of my 4 years in undergrad, just because I got to interact with people, get to learn their stories, learn how to communicate in very tough situations, learn like you don't want to have one life instance define a person. And I think being at the food pantry like so like epitomize that. So I think really, I think we've said it before, but whatever you're passionate about, it's community service. If it's teaching, like one of my classmates was an 8th grade public school teacher in her gap year. Like it was not clinical at all. But it was like I would say the kickoff to like her career in education. Like anytime we have any sort of activity that we're doing in the med school, like she is the first person to sign up to be like, here, I can create a curriculum, I can do an outline, and like here are these like pre-test, post-class questions. Like I think it's really like whatever makes you like happy, but like fulfilled and like finding meaning what you're doing. So really, like if it's sports, if it's cooking, if it's like shadowing, if it's research, community service, leadership, like I think being in clubs in undergrad too, if you find like a club that you're really passionate about, the mission, like I think it's always about quality versus quantity, rather than being like 50 different clubs. If you find 2 clubs that your views for the future align with the mission for that club, like get involved and then be like the secretary, be like the member, be like the treasurer, be like the social, whatever it is, show that involvement. And I think that also stands out. So like whatever your passion is, just try to find a way to facilitate that. And I think that comes across very well in your application. And I would also say like my major I was a community health major. So I was even like a straight science major, but I think throughout the interview cycle, not only at UVA, but like all the schools that like interviewed me, that was one of the things that always came up, like, why are you passionate in community health? And like now for residency, I'm on a specific track that's like advocacy and serving underserved groups. So like, I think it all comes together at one point. So really finding whatever that one thing or 2 things that you're passionate about and just fulfilling that exciting part, for sure.
Perfect. Awesome. How did you all adjust to the possibility of not having summer breaks during medical school? And what do you do during that extended time in medical school? So maybe talk about also the curriculum and yeah, go ahead.
So the first 18 months of and I can only speak to UVA, the first 18 months of preclinical, and you do have that first summer off, I believe. Haley, please remind me if I am completely lying right now. There are opportunities at UVA called the MSSRP, which stands for Medical Student Summer Research Program, that a lot of students tended to partake in. I did it. And you spend that summer doing some type of research with whoever. So a lot of students do that. But if you choose not to and you decide to use that break for personal reasons, that's also okay. After that, you start your clinical rotations, and that would be your phase 2 and your phase 3, which is about, I think, 18 plus 6. Someone do that math. I don't know. Yes. And so you will not have summers off in that case. So clinical, your third year, you will be working through the summer. And in all honesty, for me, I didn't even notice that I didn't have a summer off because you're kind of busy enough, like switching between rotations, that it's just kind of like any other day. Like July 17th is the same as February 12th. Like you're not really realizing that you're working through a summer, if that makes sense. And then when you start phase 3 and it's your fourth year, you will be doing rotations as well, but these will be electives. And this is also when you're starting to apply to residencies. So you have at UVA flex time, and you also have time for research. So if for whatever reason you want to use your flex time in the summer, you are able to do that. You get, I think, 10 weeks. And have a pseudo summer break if you'd like. That's totally fine and up to you. Or you could take what's called a research block, where you can do research, whether that's at the hospital, in a lab, or remotely. And in that case, you will not be doing clinical work, specifically like elective work. You'll be just focusing on that research. Lots of students take time at this time to maybe do step 1 or step 2 or whatever licensing exams they may have. But in all honesty, like I mentioned, like you're going to be busy enough that the idea of summer break is like going to be behind you. And you do get breaks during clinical as well. I'm not going to say you're working right through the year. Between, I think, every 12-week block, you get a week off to do with as you please. And lots of people go on vacation or they go home and things like that. So, but yeah, it's jarring because you go from like a standard school year to kind of having like a full-time job where, you work through the summer. But it's not terrible at all. Not at all.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I know I just wanted to highlight real quick as we're nearing the end. I'll only ask a couple more questions. We'll go 5 minutes more in our panel. And if you feel like you can type an answer in the Q&A chat box, feel free to. And I'll just answer some of the other ones live that were most upvoted. This one, for example, any recommendations for an introverted personality? I have a lot of trouble socializing and I want to improve.
I feel like this question was like geared toward me. I'm definitely like, I would say like I tend to be a little bit more introverted or shy. And like during like the first when we during preclinical, you'll still do like some like clinical exercises where you'll be like interviewing like standardized patients or like patient actors. And of course, like being a little bit introverted, sometimes that can be like, it was a little bit difficult initially, at least. But really, you just have to practice. It just comes down to like exposing yourself and to like, keep practicing, and eventually it just becomes easier. But yeah, that might be my advice. Is to just keep at it.
And I just want to add, I think that UVA curriculum is cool because they have lectures, but also smaller groups. So there's one group that you have, a group of 6 throughout your entire 4 years. And that group becomes kind of your support system. So I feel like that group, having them just to lean upon and having your coach is a great thing. But we I work with all of my classmates. We just work in all different types of groups. And I think that's helped all of us to learn how to work in a more team-based type of curriculum, especially coming from pre-med where everything feels very individualistic. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. All right, let me take a look here. Are you able to work while in medical school? How do you balance working, rotation, studying, and social activities?
So that's a really good question. At UVA, the first 18 months, as I've mentioned, is preclinical. And I have known people to work during this time because lecture time is from 8 to 12, and then from 12 to whatever time until 8 in the next day, you can use that time to do whatever you like. So people may DoorDash or Uber or something like that, or maybe do some tutoring or working in the library. So it's doable. And I think this really depends on your ability to balance yourself, like your self-discipline and your ability to time manage. But with that being said, it's a lot of information that you need to know in a very short amount of time. So if you have a job, and you are finding yourself falling behind or maybe not performing as well as you want to be performing for your own self metrics, I would say to try and back off the jobs. UVA is very good about providing financial aid for those who need it, as well as like we have federal loans and Grad Plus loans too. If you want to work and you can do all of it at once and you're, golden, go for it. But it's a lot, and the time commitments can be tough to balance. In terms of clinical, your shifts are pretty much the standard like work hour shifts. So I think unless you are not sleeping, balancing clinical work plus studying at home for shelf exams and things like that, and presentations and all these extra things that you need to do. And if you're like someone who volunteers, like Miski is avid volunteer and community service member, it can be very tough to, I don't know if it's possible, to be honest, to work during clinicals, unless someone else has another answer and is about to prove me wrong. But it's tough to balance. Like without a job, it's tough to balance, but you find your way. I think once you get settled into it and you kind of form your habits and things like that, like you'll find what works best for you. Me, I am not a morning person. I hate waking up anytime before 10. I had to learn very quickly how to kind of get used to that, and you will, if only because you're not gonna have a choice. So you will find a way because you will be forced to. But everyone does it. Everybody in medical school does it. You will find a way. You will balance everything just fine. You will graduate and you'll be a doctor just like everybody else. I promise. If we can do it, you guys can do it. It seems really daunting, but I promise you will be able to get through it just fine.
All right, I'm going to ask our last question here. And I know we have so many, so don't worry. I'll have you guys email me with some of your other questions if you'd like to have them answered. So, how is medical school life, like the housing, the commutes, the schedule in general, different from undergrad? How did you adjust?
I feel like it's interesting because I went here for undergrad and it is a very different experience, at least the first year so far. For one, I'm always in the medical school building. I rarely ever go back to campus. But I think it is different because I think mostly because I treat it differently. I think I study more like a job. I treat it like a job. I try to keep it. I don't do all-nighters anymore. I live in an apartment off campus, and so it is very different. But I think I like this pace of life, especially after taking a gap year, and I think it brings me a lot of balance as well. So I feel like I've been able to be a member of my community a little bit more. I feel like I get to do the things that make me happy outside of school. So yeah, I've liked the pace.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us at our 5th Annual National Prehealth Conference. We really appreciate, on behalf of all of the attendees here, for taking time out of your busy schedules, especially on a Saturday, to help answer our questions and learn more about how to be competitive candidates and medical students in the future. And congratulations again, Miski, for graduating tomorrow. I'm so excited for you. I'd like to know, yeah, if you'd like to give your contact information at all in the chat, feel free to. I'll leave a couple minutes open for you to give the attendees your information. If you'd like a question specifically answered, I can definitely reach out to the medical students on your behalf. You can email me at mphc@nationalprehealthconf.org, and I'm going to put that in the chat as well. This session was recorded and live streamed and posted right now to our YouTube channel at National Prehealth Community. And go ahead and check that out. I'll put that in the chat as well. And if have any questions, feel free to email us. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And our next session is writing a great pre-health personal statement. So those of you applying to medical school soon, definitely check that out. I wish I had something like that last year. So I'm really quite excited. But thank you all so much again. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thanks, Lexi. Really enjoyed chatting with you, and incredible job. As like I said in the email, like you never fail to amaze me and inspire me. So keep up the incredible work. So excited that you're going to be joining our UVA family, and please reach out if I can help with anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Excited to see you
Kaylee,
in the
Bella,
fall.
Jay.